Hello, everyone, and welcome to ScotWeek's very special broadcast of Robert the Bruce Live. I'm Diana MacFarlane of Red Rubber Media, and I handle all of the digital marketing and video production for my favorite cause, ScotWeek. Today, I'll be directing the broadcast from my home studio in Los Angeles. We are so happy you've joined us today. We have got a great show coming up. Now, for those of you who may have discovered us here just recently, ScotWeek is a new festival and conference hosted in Los Angeles that highlights both the proud history of Scottish culture and heritage, as well as Scotland's special bond with the United States and its people moving forward into the future. ScotWeek hosts events that promote not only Scottish heritage, but contemporary Scottish culture and charity that in turn provide opportunities for education and scholarship. If you'd like to know more about ScotWeek and its mission, please visit us on the web at scotweek.org. Robert the Bruce, King of Scots, is a heartfelt drama meant to be not so much a sequel, but a continuation of Robert the Bruce's story from Braveheart, which, by the way, is celebrating its 21st anniversary this year. Robert the Bruce picks up where Braveheart left off. It follows Robert in the years to come after William Wallace's death and tells the story of how the Bruce led the Scots from complete defeat to complete victory over the English. Then how he also became the great king and led Scotland into many years of prosperity. And yes, there's a spider. If you don't know what I'm talking about, guys, just Google it. It's folklore that every Scottish kid grows up with. Now, for the next few hours, you'll get to go behind the scenes and on location of this new film from writers Angus McFadden and Eric Belgo and director Richard Gray about Scotland's national hero, Robert the Bruce. ScotWeek President Cindy McIntosh and Vice President Kelsey Deanne are going to be chatting live with cast, crew, and producers of this amazing new film. They're going to take you on location to Montana, USA, to some of the sets used in the making of the film. Robert the Bruce was filmed in Scotland and Montana, with Montana doubling for the Highlands of Scotland. That's right, Montana. I mean, who knew, right? If you've been to Scotland and been to Montana, you'll understand. And if you haven't, then you will after watching Cindy and Kelsey tour some of these beautiful locations located very near the Yellowstone Film Ranch. Some of the exciting guests we have in store for you include star Angus McFadden, who portrays the title role of Robert the Bruce, his co-star Anna Hutchinson, Zach McGowan, Brandon Lassard, Soros Wallace, and Kevin McNally, who many of you will know as Mr. Gibbs from the Pirates of the Caribbean franchise, one of my favorites. Cindy and Kelsey will also be talking with director Richard Gray and producer Carter Bohm about how the film evolved and about the details that went into the making of the film. We also have some special tidbits to show you guys, such as a behind-the-scenes documentary about the production of Robert the Bruce and the harsh conditions that the cast and crew faced while filming in Montana during the winter. Now, if you're watching this, then you're viewing the show from one of our social media platforms. Our Facebook is ScotWeek LA, our Instagram, which is @ScotWeek, or on our YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/ScotWeek. It's on these platforms that you will see the show live, but for any reason you can't stick around for the whole show, just know that you'll be able to catch the replay over on the social media channels of our dear friends at New York City Tartan Week. You can find them on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube as well at NYC Tartan Week. We would like to thank our friends at New York City Tartan Week and President Kyle Dawson and his team for their continued support and partnership. Now, it's important to note that most of today's live show will be available on all three of our channels, but a few of the segments will only be available on our Instagram account. So I'll do my best to pop in and tell you guys when that's going to happen. We would really like to give a shout out to our sponsor for today's broadcast, the Scottish Business Network. SBN has been an integral part to ScotWeek's success and has helped us form strong relationships within Scottish industry and business. Leader Russell Daglish and his team have been a huge help in helping ScotWeek accomplish its goals of celebrating modern Scottish culture and excellence. Today, you're also going to be hearing from some of our partners, sponsors, and our friends. So many, many thanks to them. Grab a wee dram, sit back and relax. I'm going to head into my studio. And without further ado, we'll kick off the broadcast with the film's trailer. Now, by the way, if you haven't seen Robert the Bruce, it is now available on digital from Apple, Amazon Prime, Fandango, Vudu, and on-demand platforms. This is Robert the Bruce, King of Scots. In 5, 4, 3...
Robert the Bruce, you want the one thing you cannot have. To be William Wallace. To be loved as he was. And that is why you will not become King of Scotland.
Any man who breaks the head of Robert the Bruce shall receive 50 gold pieces.
There is a reward. We'll have it for ourselves. Freedom. I'll show him the meaning of it.
Who is he? It's Robert the Bruce.
I shall leave here soon.
You'll leave when you're well.
Healing me is treason in these lands.
You're my king, and we'll defend you the best we can.
Start trying low! We'll find him here!
You'd fight our king to the death.
He's no king of mine. Scotland is clutched in the grip of a mighty hand. Now, we'll set her free. Is that not worth fighting for?
What if he raises an army?
Tell me that you'll lead us. Tell me, and we will fight again.
We need to know our men died for something.
I am Robert the Bruce.
It is time we fight!
We're at a very important moment in Scottish history, I think, given the nature of what's happening in Europe and the fallout from Brexit. And Braveheart came out and did something which the Scottish Nationalist Party couldn't do in 40 or 50 years, was it got people riled up, and people were weeping in the cinemas and shouting freedom, freedom. And 2 years later, Scotland had a Scottish Parliament for the first time. I do hope that the Scots will embrace it, even though it's been made by a bunch of Aussies, and there's a few Irishmen in there and a couple of Englishmen and some Americans. When I got to play Robert the Bruce originally, it was a very exciting moment because every single Scottish kid knows the story of Robert the Bruce in the cave with the spider. And so when we did Braveheart, the film just stopped at that point. And I was like, well, it would be wonderful to be able to tell the rest of the story of how Scotland actually got its independence. So for several years that gestated, and then eventually the co-writer Eric Belgo and I went off to a cabin in Europe, and we basically started writing the first version of the story.
The beautiful thing about independent film is that you get to travel and work with communities that hasn't necessarily made a lot of films, because often it's better to go to places that haven't got a lot of film work if you're not chasing a tax credit, because they're just so excited. This element of travel is also what inspires the crew and the cast to want to come on the journey with you. Yeah, so Montana might feel like a weird choice, but actually we just finished a film there, and a lot of Robert the Bruce takes place in a peasant's hut that's in a snowy mountain. Great thing about Montana is it has a long winter, and we just made all the connections, just met all the locations. So we knew we could get a lot of it in Montana, and then working with Cyrus Wallace, who worked on Braveheart. He was a contact of ours that we could, and a historian for all things Scotland, that we could call upon with photos and say, hey, is this place in Scotland? Does this match Montana? So able to shoot in Scotland and Montana was the base for our main family farm. But when we were doing forts and scenics and Isle of Skye and Glencoe and battle sequences, we had we had Scotland as well.
To be honest, the pictures he sent me, I thought it was actually Scotland. So to come to Montana to see this, it seems to be in the same parallel, same mountains, and a lot of times I've just felt like home here, you know. So as a location for Scotland, I just defy anybody to pinpoint where these differences are, because I'm not going to tell them.
I thought maybe a Scottish film in Montana wouldn't look as legitimate, and what changed my mind was our great friend Soris Wallace. We FaceTimed him in Scotland, and immediately the shots we sent him, he said, this is such and such area of Scotland, and I'm positive it's Scotland, and it looks identical to it. And Richie and I gave a high five, and I said, I'm in.
My forefathers and grandfathers and grandmothers came from Scotland, so it's something that's in my blood memory, and you have this absolute pride for your country.
The weather itself became an incredibly important character in the story. You know, there's no escaping the harshness of the weather and the bitterness of the cold, and so that itself kind of got under our skins and inside our bones, and you can see it on our breath, and the conditions were incredibly hard to work with. I think there was quite a lot of people who were like, you know, I don't know if I'm going to make it here because this is really rough, and some people didn't. And I think the only thing that kept us going was Richie showed us a montage of scenes every week, which would reduce people to tears, and we would realize that we were working on something which was actually quite good, and that sort of fortified us for the next week.
I think the elements are something that you can look at on film and kind of in media and stuff like that a million times, but until you're actually in it and like having all these little episodes that happen because of the climate, you don't actually understand. Even in our little hut, which should be our little warm zone, our breath is just there in all the little bits, and it's so gorgeous because Morag, Ivor and Scott all sleep in the bottom bunk together. And when we're huddling to keep warm, it's because we're really bloody trying to keep warm. It is, it's just the most honest thing, and every single thing has just added to it 100-fold.
These are the coldest conditions we've ever worked in, and the hardest thing that I've ever done. And we felt blessed a lot in the shoot because we got the locations, the snow, the sun when we wanted it, which often doesn't happen. The beautiful thing about how cold it was the pictures and the performances that we captured because of the cold. The vapour coming out of their mouths and the snow falling. That's not snow machines, that's not CGI vapour. And as tremendously hard as it was for the actors, that allowed them to get into character because they were on that farm and they were cold and they could see what it was like.
People really dug deep inside, and it's brought out the best in people, and you know, I've never seen a crew work like this before. It's quite awe-inspiring.
I loved it right away, and I knew we could make it right away because it wasn't a huge action adventure. The guts of the story is the widow and orphan children that saved the King of Scotland.
I am Robert the Bruce.
So Angus and I started this journey about 12 years ago, and this particular script was written about 10 years ago. There have been years of frustration and effort leading up to the first day of action on this particular production. What's amazing about that is that as we go through this production, I can't imagine it being cast better.
So this script, which we all got very excited about, attracted some phenomenal actors. It's really just a testament to the type of people we had on board on the film, and to Angus and his connections, and to our previous connections, that we were able to bring in a cast of this caliber. And then these kids, phenomenal brother and sister actors, like the best going around, just phenomenal kids. And when you see them and when you watch them, they acted like siblings, and that was the core of the film.
I can't imagine it being shot better. The production elements that we see are beyond what was scripted. And the most amazing part of it is that there are physical places that I had never seen before that we've shot in this film that were in my head when I was writing the first draft, almost as though this is the place where it was supposed to be done after all that time.
It's a modest film, but it's a big story on a huge setting. When you've got Angus at the head and Anna and all these amazing character actors around you, it makes my job a lot easier because they're all so passionate and they all care so much about their performance.
Braveheart's one of the movies that made me want to do this as a career when I was in 9th grade when it came out. He is as big of a part of that movie as anyone who made that movie, because he kind of sets up all the dramas based on the arc of Robert the Bruce, who actually was called Braveheart.
It took us 11 years to make this film, and I don't know why it took so long, but in a way, it was because it was meant to happen right at this point. A version of the story was set in France and in Rome and in England and in Scotland. It was jumping around on a gigantic epic historical landscape. We came up with the notion of trying to make it more intimate about this family of people who live on a croft and basically have nothing, but they find this guy who's basically at death's door lying in the snow, and it's Robert the Bruce.
Morag is a Scottish peasant woman. We meet her at a pretty tough time. She's looking after the farm all by herself. She has the children, her beautiful Scot is her life and her light, because the love that a mother has for her son, just it's the strongest thing.
In that process of making it more intimate, we actually ended up making a far better script than we originally had. It became a story of mothers and the sons who go off to war and die generation after generation.
Her father fought in the wars. Her husband also fought with Robert the Bruce and died of wounds in the battlefield. So she knows hardships, she knows a really hard life, and she's a very hardy woman herself.
This story is about the soul of Scotland.
Especially honored, I think, when I showed up and met Shores Wallace, who's kind of the official, as official as you can get for kind of stories like this, to have someone like that around who knows everything. And
I'm a historian. I'm also the 14th Shawnee, and what that means is the storyteller within a family. So the people who stood beside Wallace, they've passed that story down through the generations. So I'm the 14th generation to see this. It kind of completes something for me on Braveheart, and I think it's important to be done, because it's like the pre-story to Wallace. Who was he? Where did he come from? But what happened to Bruce? That's a very important story, and I feel honoured to be part of this.
You know, sometimes a film which is historical and can almost reflect on the condition better than if you were trying to reflect on it, here and now.
The integrity of the film and everything behind it is deep. It's strong.